It's my nerd world. Welcome to it. I'm glad you're here. Hey, I'm your host, Jon Justice, and on the show this week, Daisy Ridley keeps talking about the Rise of Skywalker while she makes the rounds promoting Ophelia. The Rise of Skywalker is a different genre. An epic fight coming between Kylo and Rey. Rey's parents. Yes, we're talking about Rey's parents again. And per the usual, a lot of outlets have picked up on these comments that Daisy Ridley has made, and they've been running with the least important things, in my opinion, so we'll get into that. Also, if it's not Reylo in the sequel trilogy, then what else is there? We'll reverse engineer kind of the sequel trilogy, looking back at the other two trilogies, and then again sort of address this question of if it's not going to be Reylo in the Rise of Skywalker in one way, shape, or form, then what else is there in terms of the core of the story? Plus, a lot of listener feedback this week. Speaking of this week, the show is brought to you by Blaster. Blaster is the all-new audio-based social networking app. You can instantly record and upload audio blasts to a personal profile, your personal profile, and your Blaster timeline. Then at the same time, you can share that audio blast on Facebook and Twitter. It's Periscope without the video, an audio version of Twitter. Simply record your voice, talk about what's on your mind, or upload pre-recorded audio files from your phone's iPhone storage app. You can add a picture to give some reference, right? Hashtags as well. People can search for different topics. And that's the idea behind Blasters. You download the Blaster app, it's free. And then once enough people are on it and using it, you can go in and search for whatever topic you want to hear commentary on. I want to hear about the Rise of Skywalker. I want to hear people's thoughts on Spider-Man Far From Home, which I really enjoyed on the first viewing. And then in retrospect, after a few days, I think I like the Homecoming better. But that's all we'll talk about when it comes to Spider-Man. Connect, again, your other social media to your profile so people can connect with you outside of Blaster as well. Go to the App Store and look for Blaster app. It is free to download, or you can go to theblasterapp.com. They are still in the testing phase, working some bugs out. I know they just released an update, but you want to go and secure your Blaster handle now before the app blows up. They haven't started officially promoting the app yet, so I would encourage you, take a moment and go to the App Store and download the Blaster app and secure your handle today. You can follow me on Blaster, Jon, Jon Justice, or My Nerd World. And again, this is the perfect app for those who listen and produce Star Wars podcasts or other podcasts. You can promote your show, comment on other shows, share those audio blasts on Twitter. I've been blasting a lot as of late. So if you download the app, you find me and you follow me, you'll be able to go and check out some of the comments that I had on a myriad of different topics. All right, let's go ahead and get into the show for this week.
We've passed on all we know. 1,000 generations live in you now. But this is your fight. We'll always be with you. No one's ever really gone.
Stand in our way.
I find your lack of faith disturbing.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you? I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you.
My Nerd World.
Just let it in.
I've been on vacation. My yearly week-long summer vacation right around the 4th of July. So I've been on vacation all week, which has been real nice. Been super busy, but mostly because I've been doing a lot of things that I wouldn't normally have time to do in the middle of doing my weekly radio show. Also had a Star Wars related project for my office/bedroom because I keep bizarro hours. I'll talk about that towards the end of the show because I'm super excited about it. But in the middle of working on this project, I had to put together some items from IKEA, and I decided I was listening to some podcasts, and then I had to turn some podcasts off. This goes back to what I was saying. I guess I've been probably making a comment or two one way or the other on most of the podcasts, but it's just, you have an expectation from certain shows, and you listen and you just go, I don't have time for this nonsense. And it sounds very... The running joke we have on our radio show is pinkies up, very hoity-toity. Well, I don't have time for this. But I don't. I want to listen to good Star Wars commentary. And when people head down a certain path, it's like, man, ain't nobody got time for that. I bring it up because what I did was I threw on Star Wars Rebels while I was building these cabinets from IKEA, and totally got sucked into it again. I realized, too, that I think for a lot of Rebels, I have all 4 seasons, right? Yeah, right. I have all 4 seasons on Blu-ray. But I realized that I haven't done a lot of rewatching of many of the episodes, especially the first season, or at least it's been a while since I watched the first season. So I just threw in the first season, and oh my gosh, I was really enjoying it. I think that's also partly because I had... The only cartoon that I'd watched as of late was Resistance, and I enjoyed Resistance, but because of it being geared towards an even younger audience than Rebels was, there just was a lack of a connection there made. The final episode of Resistance is fantastic, but watching Rebels was really enjoying it, so I'm going to start working through the entire series again, because Rebels is a really, really good series. It's kind of right there in the middle when it comes to how it's, the age range that it's geared towards between Clone Wars and Resistance, right? Clone Wars on the more adult end and Resistance on more of the kid end. But just right down the middle, Rebels sits, in my opinion. And I would love to see some type of live action element to Rebels. Like, it would be great if the timeline worked where, and it should, the timeline worked where, say, in the Cassian Andor show, if we were able to get the live action equivalent of the Rebels cast, that would be absolutely fantastic. But I'm thinking now of how the Rebels season goes, and I don't think they actually got involved with the rebellion until later in the series, so it really depends on where Cassian Andor is set. But that's been my Star Wars watching as of late. We've been watching a lot of other films on vacation, but watching Star Wars, I've been wiping out on Rebels. So let's get into a couple of these articles here. One from IO9, the other one's from Collider. Some of these quotes are taken from the MTV Podcast Network with Josh Horowitz. And then some people on Twitter have also made some comments. Slimo on Twitter and Ray Jedi both transcribed some of these comments that Daisy Ridley made on this podcast as she continues to make the rounds promoting Ophelia. So, and again, it's interesting because some people are really focusing on the wrong things with this. Like the one article that's here, the second one we'll talk about is how Daisy Ridley talks about Colin Trevorrow's version, and she really doesn't. And she mentions how she had a conversation with Colin Trevorrow, who was originally going to do episode 9, but it doesn't really go beyond that. It's the stuff before that I find way more interesting and entertaining than anything she talked about with Colin Trevorrow. And quite honestly, I don't care. He didn't do the movie. J.J. Abrams did. All right, so here's what Daisy Ridley had to say to kick off the show this week. And again, this comes from IO9. In a new interview, Daisy Ridley went a step further to describe just how different it would be, right? As the ending, not just to the sequel trilogy, but a trilogy of trilogies. We all expect Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker to be unique, right? However, Daisy Ridley went on to say how different it would actually be. She says, genre-wise, it's different from the other two, which will become clear when the film comes out. Ridley said in an interview with USA Today, it's quite emotional. There's a different drive than the previous two films, but there's a lot of fun. I really missed John Boyega during the last one, but we're back together, and now Oscar Isaac is part of it. To me, it felt like kids going on an adventure. Okay, So let's stop here and break this apart a bit. This is pretty easy to break down, in my opinion. When you think that this film, based off of what we know per some of the more credible leaks, is going to be much more story-wise driven with a MacGuffin. It's going to have more of a MacGuffin focus. We just don't know what the MacGuffin is yet. So because of that, I think that this is going to be much more akin to something like Raiders of the Lost Ark or Goonies. I only mentioned Goonies because we watched it over the weekend, and it was the first time I'd ever seen it. I'd seen bits and pieces of it, with a movie that famous. If you didn't ever sit down and watch the whole thing, inevitably you've seen like little bits and parts, and that's what I've seen. I really enjoyed it, though. Watched it with my son. But those movies, sort of have a MacGuffin, treasure map, and, looking for the Ark, looking for the treasure. I believe that The Rise of Skywalker is going to be more akin to those types of films, right? More adventure movies. And to bring it into Star Wars terms, I think it's the difference between The Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, right? The Empire Strikes Back is very much closely aligned with The Last Jedi in how it deals with the characters in the story. The characters and the emotion of the film kind of drive the storyline. You have this great central theme in The Last Jedi of the Resistance being chased down by the First Order throughout the middle part of the film that's driving this, and then you have this continuing journey of Rey with Kylo Ren and the Force Skyping, and we'll get into more of that later on because that plays into the commentary that I want to give with regard to, if it's not Reylo driving these movies, then what is it, right? So when we get to The Rise of Skywalker, it makes all the sense in the world that they're going to come back together. We know that. Many of the cast members have mentioned this already. And it's going to be more of an adventure. There's going to be more of a, here's point A, we got to get to point B, so we make it to point C, right? A New Hope. See, that's the brilliance of A New Hope, in my opinion. A New Hope is and was crafted in such a way where it was very simple to go and follow. And so was The Force Awakens too, don't misunderstand. But I've mentioned this before, I forget the whole idea of the plans, or the map, right? I know the map is supposed to be replacing the Death Star plans from A New Hope in The Force Awakens, but I completely forget that the map is even driving these individuals to where their destination is. Whereas with A New Hope, I always remembered, we have these, we have to get these plans to the rebellion to stop the Death Star. It was a very direct, straightforward, this is what we need to do. And something similar happening, right, also when it comes to Return of the Jedi, we have to take down the shield in order to expose the Death Star 2 so we can take it out and so we can remove the threat. It makes sense. The Last Jedi wasn't like that. It was very much driven by the emotions and the storylines of the characters. It was very character-driven. So it makes all the sense in the world that The Rise of Skywalker is going to be more akin to Return of the Jedi when comparing it to The Empire Strikes Back. And I'm excited for that. And again, this is also coming off of, and I think it was very serendipitous that I ended up watching Goonies this week, heading into this week's show, because that movie is all about those kids being together and going on this grand adventure. We watched Stranger Things 3 over the weekend, and very much the same thing. Really liked the third season. Very different. No spoilers, but I know some people have been complaining when it comes to Stranger Things season 3 of the more John Hughes. We're spending a lot of time with these kids together and less about the threat of the series. And I actually really enjoyed that about it. I will probably go back and watch season 3 again just because of the interaction between the kids, as opposed to the other seasons with the backdrop of the rising threat that takes place in the entire series. And that's what I'm really excited for the Rise of Skywalker as well. Comments have been made about this, sort of, smattering comments have been made about this, but and Daisy Ridley makes a comment like this in the story about how missing John Boyega during the last one. I really like the idea of seeing all these characters together and interacting. And J.J. Abrams does this really well, and I think this is also where Chris Terrio is going to shine. My guess would be Chris Terrio was probably brought in to do more of the meat and potatoes storyline part of it, where J.J. Abrams is probably handling a lot of the banter. I could be wrong. But having Rey, Finn, Poe all together, right, going on an adventure, provides the opportunity for that interaction that we didn't get, right? And again, just keep comparing. I'll keep comparing Return of the Jedi to the Empire Strikes Back, and how they all went to Endor together. I could very much see it playing out the same way as well. I'm beginning to see some of the loose parallels and connections that J.J. Abrams might be making when it comes to the Rise of Skywalker and Return of the Jedi, where, you know, Luke needed to go out on his own to deal with this threat, to deal with Vader. I shouldn't say threat, to deal with Vader, to deal with his father, and everybody else came along with him. And remember, I don't know if one connects with the other, but go back to some of the really early commentary around some of the images that were released, and especially the Iger Khan footage that we still haven't seen, where those that saw the footage at that Disney shareholders meeting said they saw a clip that had all the main characters, your Finn, your Poe, and your Rey in the Millennium Falcon, and Rey saying she needed to go and do this, and they said, no, you're not going without us. Right? That sounds very reminiscent to being inside the shuttle Tydirian, and Luke, Han, and Leia, with Chewbacca, I don't mean to leave Chewbacca out, but and with Chewie, you know, heading to the Death Star 2 in the forest moon of Endor, and Luke ends up sensing, right, that Vader is there. I think we could get something very, very similar in The Rise of Skywalker, right? All centered on this idea that they're going on an adventure and a search for this MacGuffin. We just don't know what the MacGuffin is yet. All right, getting back to the IO9 article. So, does that mean the film is more dramatic, more carefree, and adventurous? Does Ridley actually mean genre in its usual sense, or is she talking more about tone? We have exactly zero answers to those questions at this point, the article goes on to say. Speaking of answers, though, in the same interview, Daisy Ridley did confirm The Rise of Skywalker would put to rest the question of Rey's lineage. Director J.J. Abrams did say the question is answered, Ridley said. So at the end of the film, you do know what the dealio is. Okay, and we'll double back to that. We'll get back to a little bit later on as we move through these comments. We'll get back to the whole parent deal and my rationale, my opinion on why people are still so focused on Rey's lineage. Okay, so again, we'll save that for when we get through some more of this material. Finally, and most controversially, Ridley said that she understood and sympathized with Star Wars fans who were put off by Rian Johnson's The Last Jedi, even if she disagreed with them. I wasn't surprised, no, she said when asked about the backlash. It's just a different thing. Everyone's going to have an opinion now anyway on the internet, but I also think it's fair, Ridley continued. If people hold something incredibly dear and think they know how it should be, and it's not like that, it's fair for people to think that they were done wrong. It doesn't mean they were. Ultimately, Ryan's a filmmaker and one person who can't dictate how a film is supposed to be, and one person can't dictate how a film is supposed to be, but freedom of expression, sure. And this full interview was in the USA Today. Okay, so this before we get into the Collider article, where we get into a little bit more of this, let's spend some time here with this Daisy Ridley and Rian Johnson Last Jedi stuff. Not a lot of time, just a little bit of time. She's right, okay? But it's important to note, in my opinion, that I think Lucasfilm knew all along what they were doing. Kathleen Kennedy knew. You don't have to like it, right? But Kathleen Kennedy knew all along what it was that they were going to deliver. These individuals aren't, and I don't see people for the most part saying this, but you know, the Kathleen Kennedys, the Rian Johnsons, the story group individuals, right? Bob Iger, they're not dumb. They get it. You know, they follow social networking. They know the world that we live in right now. They know that everybody has the ability to speak their mind anonymously, on a moment's notice, right? If you ever wanted to know how bad things would be if we could go and read each other's minds, for crying out loud, just go to Twitter. Twitter is the closest thing that you can get to being able to read the mind of individuals, because you have millions of people on Twitter with anonymous Twitter accounts hiding behind them who speak their mind that probably should keep those thoughts locked in their head. That's why I really am excited about this new Blaster app that's been created, because it provides a level of context that's necessary for a lot of for a lot of comments that are being made. And I like the idea of being able to hear somebody's thoughts about something and hear the inflection and hear the tone. You could still be anonymous if people don't know your voice, right? But I like the idea of being able to listen to somebody make a comment about something that I'm interested in, rather than just reading it on a page and then having to try to add my own context or inflection to what it was they were trying to say. That's why I really am excited to be working with Blaster and helping them promote this app, because I think it provides a very valuable and unique opportunity in a world where social networking has a lot of baggage and negatives attached to it, along with some of the positives that it brings. But Kathleen Kennedy and those guys, they knew what they were getting into when it came to The Last Jedi. They knew that what was being created. And I applaud them for being, for all intents and purposes, brave enough to allow Rian Johnson's vision to come to fruition. Because for many of us, and especially for me, The Last Jedi is a masterpiece, in my opinion. I'm so happy with what they did with it. And I can't wait to see what The Rise of Skywalker does, dovetailing off of what Rian Johnson gave us. Now, all that being said, this comment, or these comments here from Daisy Ridley, talking about the backlash of The Last Jedi, right? Reminded me, right? I wasn't surprised, when she was asked about it. It's just a different thing. I went ahead and grabbed an old piece of audio here, and I'm going to play it for you. This is the behind-the-scenes featurette for The Last Jedi. And I'm going to play this for you in its entirety, because they were very early on, including in this behind-the-scenes featurette, they were letting everybody know that we were getting into something. We were getting into, and we were going to be seeing something very different than what everybody was expecting. And they did it with this behind-the-scenes featurette. They did it with the teaser trailer, and they certainly did it with the full trailer. So those three main items of promotion for The Last Jedi laid out where that movie was going. So anybody, in my opinion, that came out of that movie just completely flabbergasted, if they'd watched all this stuff, wasn't paying close enough attention. And that's going to play into and relate to more of my comments when we get into Rey's parentage, this not paying close enough attention. But let's flash back a bit, and we'll go back in time to The Last Jedi and the behind-the-scenes featurette.
Everybody set? 3, 2, 1.
Action.
Episode 8. Gosh. The first film didn't even have a number.
Rian has written a story that's unexpected but right. Some of the stuff that happens, people are going to be like, oh my God.
Even though I think I know it all, they throw things at me story-wise I never could have imagined.
And even though everybody knows that it's the second in a trilogy, it feels like its own thing.
Go.
Star Wars is so cool because there's all these creatures and all these amazing visual effects. But all the characters are also so complex.
Rian needs to work on his Wookiee sounds. It's ridiculous. New director can't even just learn a Wookiee sound.
It feels like the storylines are becoming more established.
We're really getting to know these new characters. Also with the characters that we know and love, we're seeing their lives change.
Everything is being shifted in an opposite way to what the audience expected after 7. Ryan's made Star Wars fresh and new.
I'm hoping it'll be a little shocking, but I'm hoping it'll feel real and honest.
It's our most ancient story of good against evil, told in the most fascinating way. But it has a real spiritual depth to it.
Beautiful. It's about family, and that's what's so powerful about it.
It's a wrap!
In my opinion, right, and we've discussed this a lot, in my opinion, they had a roadmap for the main characters, okay, especially when it comes to Ben Solo and to Rey. And that roadmap leads to those two characters at the end of this trilogy being the ones that are going to bring the balance and end of the conflict forever. We know that's going to happen. Or, or at least for the time being, right? They're finally going to end this dark versus light, dark side versus light side that we've seen for all these years now, and that was the roadmap. Adam Driver had said that, right? I knew where my characters were going, and I'll repeat what I've said all along when it comes to Rian Johnson and The Last Jedi. His job was to make sure that arc wasn't disrupted, to add some angles to that arc, and he crafted a very personal story as an extension of The Force Awakens that did just that. It took these characters where they needed to go on their journey, pushed them further, connected them further, and set the stage for this finale that J.J. Abrams is going to bring us coming up in December. Rian Johnson made some personal, bold choices with some of the characters that aren't playing a central role anymore, and that's Luke Skywalker. And, of course, we all know the frustration that's come with that and the people that are upset and how he was handled and all that. But that was Rian Johnson's task, and I believe, for me, that he did an amazing job of doing that in setting the stage for this final movie. All right. And I just thought that behind-the-scenes featurette, in retrospect, was pretty interesting in the way that they were describing how the movie is, especially Daisy Ridley. They knew what they had, and they knew there was going to be controversy. None of this was a surprise to any of them, even if it was a surprise to a lot of people who weren't ready. All right, let's get to this. Adam Chitwood at a Collider. Star Wars fans still reeling over that incredible throne room sequence in Star Wars The Last Jedi, may be in for an even bigger, more epic lightsaber sequence between Rey and Kylo in Star Wars Episode 9. Vanity Fair released the first look at the characters from J.J. Abrams' trilogy capping Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker. One of the most striking images was Daisy Ridley's Rey and Adam Driver's Kylo Ren battling it out with their lightsabers during a rainstorm. We believe it's on top of the Death Star, too. Given that these were promo images, it's unclear if this was a direct scene from the movie, but we now have confirmation from Ridley that not only is the sequence in the film, it's positively epic. Appearing on Josh Horowitz's Happy, Sad, Confused podcast, Ridley teased as much as she could about the big rain showdown between Rey and Kylo Ren. I think they've done a great job with all the relationships, with the fun relationships, and with the sort of strange thing with Rey and Kylo. We'll get back to that. Also, we have a great fight. I was really happy with that Vanity Fair, that the Vanity Fair pictures did a bit of it. It's a great fight. Like, I've become such a better fighter, and they made the lightsabers lighter, so it actually looks like we're swinging light and not like heavy swords. I liked the idea that the lightsabers were heavy. I've mentioned this before, but the scene with Jet Lucas, George Lucas's son, towards the end of Revenge of the Sith, when Bail Organa shows up at the temple and the clone troopers basically say, you have to leave, and Jet Lucas shows up and starts wiping them out. He's throwing that lightsaber around like it's heavy. I mean, he was smaller. He was a Padawan, but he's throwing it around and I just thought that was cool. And I love what J.J. Abrams had done and what Rian Johnson did when it comes to the lightsaber aesthetic and the sounds and the battle, because he switched it up kind of a bit. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out and how noticeable it is if the lightsabers are lighter. And I'm kind of getting off on a tangent here. We know that there is supposed to be these Force flash fights. These were rumored by MakingStarWars.net, and on the cover art for the art book, we see what these might look like, where Rey and Kylo Ren are battling in different locations through the Force that bring that bring them to these different places while they battle it out. Also heard a recent rumor that by the end of a fight, I don't know if it's the fight, by the end of the fight, they're battling in almost a playful way. Like they've come to terms with each other and they're almost like play fighting by the end of it. The thought that immediately popped into my mind when I heard that rumor was Mr. and Mrs. Smith. Love that movie, by the way. If you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. There's a fight between Mr. and Mrs. Smith in the house, and they're trying to kill each other. And then by the end of it, Angelina Jolie finally gets the upper hand on Brad Pitt, her husband, because he gives up. He's like, I'm done. Just do it. Do it already. And she's like prompting him, come on, fight me. She's got a gun pointed to his head. He's like, no, man, I give up. And then they end up making out and they end up doing it. I could very much see that, not to that extent, but I could very much see something like that playing out, where these two characters, they know they're drawn to each other. There is that connection between the two of them. The idea is that they're supposed to battle it out. They're trying to be mad at each other, but at the end, maybe it's, and this is pure speculation, but maybe it's the Force telling them, knock it off. Stop fighting each other. There's a similar dynamic. Okay, and I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, so let me go about it this way, right? It is a consistent television and movie trope to have these two characters that are constantly bickering and fighting with one another, but deep down inside, it's just because they're masking their true emotions, and in the end, those true emotions come out and they end up together. I could very much see something similar playing out when it comes to Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver, when it comes to Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, and Rey. All right, getting back to the article here from IO9. Ridley also spoke about the arduous process of creating that throne room scene from The Last Jedi, then revealed that for the big Episode 9 fight they shot in November in the pouring rain. The throne room fight felt pretty cool. And also, that was really hard because everything had to match up. There's like a dolly shot coming through it, and it ends with me, and I think I was fighting James at the time, who's the stuntman with the two swords. So it was tiring. We did like 25 takes because if this one thing was off, we had to keep going. But I was really proud of that fight. This fight, it was November, and we had water being thrown at us. I'm not going to complain about the cold. I'm just going to do it. Laughs. I'm just going to do it. So it was like a real thing of stamina. It felt really epic, and it felt epic even at the time. One can only imagine what it's going to look like. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm looking at the clock because I'm gonna go down a spoiler road here, and there's people that haven't, for whatever reason. Okay, if you haven't if you've maintained spoiler free and you haven't heard me talk about this before on the show, I want to give you a fair out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my timer, and I'm going to set it for 2 minutes. Okay, and I'm going to set the timer for 2 minutes. I'm going to play a little in between thing here. My little leak warning, right? And I'll give 2 minutes to give my thoughts on what's happening here. Now that Daisy Ridley has gone in and revealed a bit of this fight and this picture that we saw, and I'm using it this week for the podcast promotion. So if if you don't want to listen, okay, if you don't want to know what I'm going to say, then all you got to do is skip forward exactly 2 minutes in the podcast, and you can miss it, okay? And I'm timing it out right now, so we're going to start this whole thing at 35 minutes exactly, and then we'll be back at 37 minutes. All right, so here we go.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
Okay, so here's the deal. We know that there's a force. We believe there's a force flash fight at some point in the movie, and we think at least we've been told that takes place earlier on in the film, and that potentially there is a teaming up of Kylo Ren and Rey. I believe that happens, and I've mentioned this. I mentioned this on last week's show. This promotional shot that has Rey with her lightsaber turned on, and it's got the other Resistance characters, Poe and Finn there, and then in C-3PO's helmet, you can kind of see the reflection of red, and that might be Kylo Ren. And I think that this all takes place sometime around when we're on the Jordan set on that the Pisana planet, right? What we saw in the trailer. So we know that this fight between Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver is taking place. It's probably towards the end of the film on the Death Star too. Here's what I think is going on, and I think this might be minor confirmation for one of the bigger spoilers that we've been told. If indeed Palpatine learned how to force possess other people, we have been told that the finale of the film will focus on Kylo Ren becoming possessed by the spirit of Palpatine. I think that's what this fight is. I think Palpatine is in another individual. I think that person might be Matt Smith. He jumps from Matt Smith's body into Kylo Ren's body, and then you get this massive, epic lightsaber fight that is between Kylo Ren and Rey, but really it's Rey and Palpatine, leading to Kylo Ren trying to fight it out of him and basically telling Rey, you got to kill me to get rid of this. That's what I think, and why that's what I think goes down in the film. I think this epic battle is actually Rey versus Palpatine possessing Kylo Ren's body that leads to Rey striking down Kylo Ren to bring about his redemption once he leaves his body after he's almost dead or is dead and is brought back to life.
The hyperdrive is leaking.
Hey, look at that. I did it in 2 minutes. Now I have to stop my alarm. It won't stop. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so I think that kind of worked. Boy, if you jumped ahead in the podcast and landed right on that moment and you heard all the spoilers, you're going to be really, really upset with me. Let's get back to this. Let's get back to this article. Initially, J.J. Abrams was not the one crafting the conclusion to the story. Lucasfilm had first hired Jurassic World helmer Colin Trevorrow to co-write and direct Star Wars 9, but he left the project over creative differences. When asked by Horowitz if she ever spoke to Trevorrow about his plans, Ridley confirmed Trevorrow's version of 9 was very different. Okay, he was Josh Gad's guest at the Murder on the Orient Express premiere, and we went out for dinner afterwards. And Colin sat next to me, and I was like, "What's this gonna be like?" Because all I had heard, I didn't know what had happened. I just knew he wasn't doing it anymore, and he did sort of tell me and sort of not. Actually, no, we had gone for dinner and stuff. We went for dinner, and Michelle, who was a producer, so I sort of knew. I think everything happens for a reason, I guess. Indeed, while Trevorrow, Derek Connolly, and Jack Thorne all worked on the first version of 9, the screenplay for the finished version was created only by Abrams and Terrio, who was brought on board after Abrams agreed to write and direct the conclusion. So there exists a screenplay for a separate version of Star Wars 9 that, according to Ridley, was very different from Abrams' movie. Perhaps someday we'll get to compare the existing version with what could have been. I don't care. I mean, I guess I care. I guess down the line, like in some making of book, I might be interested. Or I would be interested to see what Colin Trevorrow's version of the movie was, but ultimately, it's not his movie anymore. It's J.J. Abrams, and this is the one we're going to end up seeing. You know, it's kind of like going back, and this is the perfect example. I went back and I read for one of the podcasts one of the original script versions for The Empire Strikes Back and all the different stuff that was in there. It's like, okay, man, it's interesting. And there was maybe stuff to be gleaned looking at future films of possible things that they could do based off of some of the original more out there ideas that were for The Empire Strikes Back, but ultimately it kind of leaves you flat because that wasn't the movie that was made. And all the focus, for the most part, has been on, Daisy Ridley talks about Trevorrow leaving, and they really didn't talk anything about it. To me, the more interesting aspect of that whole thing was that Daisy Ridley confirming that fight was actually indeed real, because I questioned that. That photo shoot by Ann Leibovitz for Vanity Fair, we know that they've staged shots before. They did for The Phantom Menace. There's the famous shot of Darth Maul and Obi-Wan Kenobi on Tatooine jumping in the air with their lightsabers drawn, and they're going at each other. For The Force Awakens, there was a shot of Captain Phasma on Takodana standing in front of the her crumbled castle there. And that wasn't in the movie. It might have been in the first place. I think she was supposed to originally fight Finn at that point in time. But that was taken out. So, to me, the bigger story here was the fact that Daisy Ridley confirmed, yeah, that indeed is from the movie, and it's an epic fight. And again, I won't go into it for spoilers, but I'm really of the opinion of what I laid out in those 2 minutes prior. I think that's how this whole thing goes down, and that makes a heck of a lot more sense. And it's a very interesting way to sort of tee up when we go to look at the trailers for what the audience expectation is, and subvert those expectations once we go and see the movie. All right, getting back to some more of the comments here from this Josh Horowitz podcast. Slimo on Twitter translated some of this, and I'll just read. Some of this we already went through, but I'll read it again. We finished episode 8. And you know where Rey is entirely, so it was interesting going into that and sort of figuring out where that was going. And there was a way that JJ was describing it as we were doing it. And I was like, God, that's so true. That really is like what this film is for Rey. I think people are going to like it. I really do. And this goes back to this idea that she says by the end of the film, you're going to know what the dealio is. Getting back to the other article, let me get the exact quote here. Oh, and hold on one second. Here we go. Right. J.J. Abrams did say the question is answered, so at the end of the film, you do know what the dealio is. Okay, so here's my take on all that. You'll know what the dealio is in regard to the parents. Okay. In my opinion, they are allowing this because it's not that important to the overall story. Okay. For a handful of the more casual fans, and I believe a segment of those who either refuse to accept the idea of Reylo in the film, whatever version it is, okay, or simply don't realize the core of the story, then the Rey parentage leak is the most important thing. Why do I say that? I say that because we constantly, for good reason, look back at those other trilogies as a roadmap. We look at those other trilogies as a roadmap to where these movies are heading. And we should continue to do that. The mistake, in my opinion, that people are making is they're using the original trilogy as the roadmap for Rey in the sequel trilogy when, in all honesty, it's better to go back and look at the prequel trilogy and the arc of Anakin Skywalker from a kid to his downfall as Vader and the virgin birth, and compare that to what's happening in the sequel trilogy. I'm not saying that Rey is going to have been a virgin birth. I'm just going to say that as of right now, the Force bringing about Anakin is kind of a sidebar note. It's part of the prophecy, right? We know that Shmi was the parent, and then we just kind of leave it at that. When it comes to the sequel trilogy, everybody's focused on Rey and the big reveal of who her parent is. Is it going to be Luke? Is it going to be Han and Leia? And we've been duped all along, and we're expecting this because of what we saw in the original trilogy. But in my opinion, they're looking in the wrong place. And I don't think that Disney or Lucasfilm allows this information to get out there without very specific intent. And the very specific intent, in my opinion, of talking about this and allowing Daisy Ridley to go out there and say, you're going to know what the dealio is with the parents, is to satisfy the casual fans, right? And those individuals who are not completely on board with Reylo or just are completely missing the signs of that. Okay? Because if you're not on board with the idea of Reylo, if you think that Kylo Ren cannot be redeemed and he should die, then it's a good idea for Disney to promote, hey, you're going to find out about her parents, though. And then people go, okay, cool, I'm going to go into this movie to find out about her parents. When the reality is, no, the bigger part of the story is you're going to figure out this whole relationship with Kylo Ren and Rey. Also, the fact that Daisy Ridley even said the relationships of the characters and the strange thing between Kylo Ren and Rey. Look, they're doing it all over again. They're laying this whole thing out for us, and they're being very deliberate, and they're being very careful in laying it out for the fandom, in my opinion. I was just on Twitter before I started the show today, just looking over the column for the Rise of Skywalker, and seeing again people's comments about, Kylo Ren can't be redeemed. Oh my gosh, he's too evil. Blah 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 blah. And that's fine. Everybody's entitled to your opinion. I'm sure those individuals have valid reason. I'm not going to push back on that. You can have that. I have my own opinion, but I think you're wrong. For those individuals, the parent issue is probably a much bigger deal than it is for the vast majority of the rest of us who know, in, again, my opinion, what this sequel trilogy is all about. So let's get into that portion of it, right? Before we dive into listener feedback, sort of the core topic for the show this week, and that is, if it is not Reylo, then what is it?
Something inside me has always been there, but now it's awake, and I need help.
It is really tough, relatively speaking, examining these films based off of what the original trilogy did, because what the original trilogy did was really unique and special. All of the surrounding circumstances combined created this lightning in a bottle situation. It was really interesting watching Stranger Things Season 3, because it was taking place in 84, 85, and there were references to Star Wars in the films, in the series, and I thought about that a bit going into the show this week, and going back to the 80s and thinking about that and how life was different, and back when the original Star Wars movie came out and the movie theaters were filled with these downbeat, depressing, apocalyptic type films, and Earthquake and Towering Inferno and all this stuff, and then you get this optimistic science fiction film in a galaxy far, far away, and this hero's journey crafted by an individual who had a love of storytelling and the classic myths that put this all together, and had crafted this movie that wasn't really working, and then hired a team to edit it and whittle it down that created this unique and special thing, and that's your first lightning in a bottle strike. And then you get the second lightning in a bottle strike, where George Lucas decides he's going to get another director to come in and make this second film, and it's going to be different and more character-driven, and then we're going to have this big reveal, spoiler alert, that the person that we thought was the big bad in the movie, I'm getting to something, the person we thought was the big horrible bad, the worst villain in the galaxy, is Luke Skywalker's dad. How people miss this, again, I want to be careful here, right? I want to keep it positive. You could have your opinion. Absolutely. But when you see the criticism of The Last Jedi, or individuals who don't see the redemption of Kylo Ren, but they love the original trilogy, I don't know how you get that disconnected. When Star Wars A New Hope came out, Darth Vader, and watch any of the documentaries, Darth Vader was the big bad, right? Evil personified. The moment, you have Lawrence Kasdan talking about Darth Vader, when they were trying to create Kylo Ren, talking about how the moment that Darth Vader walked on screen, you went, that guy is the bad guy. He walks in with this army of white stormtroopers, right? White armored troopers. He comes in, and he force chokes this guy, and he throws him across the room, and he's, and then he almost chokes this other guy. I find your lack of faith disturbing, and then he's killing people at the end of the movie over the Death Star, and oh my gosh, he got away! Right, okay, all right. So you follow what I'm saying. And then you get into The Empire Strikes Back, and they double down on that. He's wiping out dudes left and right. He don't care. Darth Vader doesn't give two blanks. He's like, no, man, you came out of hyperspace too close to the system, even though you thought surprise was wiser. But no, you got to die now because you're as clumsy as you are stupid. And yet, what happens at the end of that film? You get an emotional moment with the ultimate big bad reaching out to his son, telling his son to join him. And then what do you get in Return of the Jedi? And I never hear anybody talking about this, especially in comparison to, and I'm sure you'll point out, and please do, if there's other podcasts that have gone here, I'm sure there are, I haven't heard them, but please feel free to point this out to me. Talkshownerd@gmail.com, or leave a comment on YouTube. That moment on Endor, where Luke shows up and is taken into custody on the AT-AT, is brought to Vader. And Vader ignites that saber, and you first get that, ooh, he's lit up, I see you've constructed a new lightsaber. Indeed, you are powerful as the Emperor has foreseen. There's that moment when Vader turns around after he walks away, and you get that real, even before that, right? It is too late for me, son. Okay? There's a stripping down of Vader taking place there. There's a vulnerability of Vader taking place there. He's slow. It didn't take much. That's my point. It doesn't take much to bring a humanity to that character that lends you to easily go and jump to celebrating with Luke for the most part after he ultimately takes out the Emperor, only to have him come back most likely in the Rise of Skywalker, be that as it may, to make us feel sympathetic for Vader at the end after he saves his son. And we can have a discussion on who's more evil. At this point in time, it's Vader. If you put Vader and Kylo Ren side by side on who did more atrocities and shouldn't be redeemed, it's absolutely Vader. I mean, go back to the younglings, for crying out loud. As far as we know, what we've seen on screen, Kylo Ren hasn't done nearly as many atrocities along that same level. Sure, he's got the kitty litter of his, the kitty litter box filled with the ashes of his enemies, but we only know that because of what we were told in ancillary material. That was never brought up in any of the films. J.J. Abrams shoved that shot of him putting his helmet into the kitty litter later on. That was supposed to be in a completely different scene. He added that to the interrogation scene to make it more ominous, right? And again, in the movie, they never spell out what that is. Apparently, it's supposed to be the ashes of his victims. And that's the part of it where people say, he can't be redeemed. Are you kidding me? Did you not watch the original trilogy? There was no more evil character on the big screen for the longest time. He still is considered one of the biggest villains of all time, and yet he's redeemed at the end of that movie. So, you tell me, how is it that Kylo Ren can't be redeemed at this point in time? Okay, I'm wiping out here. All right. Sorry. Went off on a tangent. How people don't see that, and how I don't understand. Hey, if you feel that way, please, by all means, share your opinion on on what the difference is. I'd be more than happy to share it on the show to get your view. When comparing Darth Vader's redemption arc to Kylo Ren's, how is it that we can accept... Look, unless you didn't accept that. Like, if you didn't accept Darth Vader being redeemed at the end of the film, and I know that he died, okay, but, in my opinion, Vader dying at the end of Return of the Jedi is the perfect ending for him because of everything that he did preceding it, right? Even if he was able to... And he does essentially live. He's brought back as a Force ghost. When you compare the atrocities of Kylo Ren to Darth Vader, it's easy, in my opinion, to see how Kylo Ren is going to have to make some type of sacrifice, but can be brought back even in the flesh and still be able to go live a life of peace someplace else, maybe perhaps with Rey. Okay, let's look at it this way. If it's not Reylo, then what is it? Right? In the prequel trilogy, you had Anakin Skywalker's downfall. In the original trilogy, you had Luke's hero's journey, driven by Vader's redemption, and Luke dealing with the father and son aspect of that, right? In the prequel trilogy, we have Rey's hero journey driven by the connection between her and Ben Solo, potentially leading to Ben's redemption, right? I remember being struck as a child over Luke's anguish of not having his father. That really stuck with me. I specifically remember that feeling of, wow, that must be really hard for Luke. He wants to know who his daddy is. Now, granted, I was 5 years old, 5, 6, 7, 8, right? You know, and that's heading into the years where you really sort of start reaching out to your dad and to, you know, to find that connection. And it's something that I've learned and experienced through my two sons. So when I watched that original trilogy, that's why the Vader reveal was so impactful, because of the first film, Luke was like, you know, you knew my father, and he didn't have anybody anymore. And then you get into the second movie, and that part of it is still planted there. Luke's on his hero journey, and he doesn't have a dad, and he wanted a dad. And he still wanted to find out what happened to his dad, right? He knew what Obi-Wan had told him, and it was still driving him. That's what was driving Luke to go after Vader, was that, this guy killed my dad. I'm going to go get him. Right? No, I am your father. Right? Turns everything on its head. Okay. Looking at the sequel trilogy, right? We start off with this idea, very similar to what Rey was dealing to what Luke was dealing with Rey, right? She's on Jakku, left there by her parents. We see the ship taking off in the Force back scene. And so we kind of get this, all right. But there's no tangible thread there. She hasn't really met anybody that truly knows the answer. She meets Maz Kanata, but what does Maz Kanata tell her? Okay. That scene, very reminiscent, intentionally so, of the scene between Luke Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi. But what does Maz Kanata say? Now, it could be a certain point of view, but she says, you know, the answer you seek is not behind you, it's ahead. Okay, there's a difference there. A big, big difference there. Okay. Now, Rey says, Luke, okay, what if it was Kylo? Because here's the thing, when we get into The Last Jedi, and now we're into comparing The Last Jedi to The Empire Strikes Back, I am your father moment. That doesn't come. What do we get? We immediately jump to, Rey, join me. After a movie filled with the connection between these two characters. The whole film, the whole core, the whole A-plot of that movie, of The Last Jedi, is Rey and Kylo Ren. And those two getting to know each other and finding out ultimately what happened, leading into that, joining up and teaming up, and then Rey's rejection of Kylo Ren, because he still didn't get it because he's a dumb boy, when he asked her to join him. He should have stopped the firing on the fleet. He should have thrown down his weapon right then, but he couldn't get past the dark side part of him that was still influencing him, and Rey rejects him. Okay, so if these three movies aren't about Reylo, then what in the world are they about? Which doubles back to the whole parental question. I think there's a lot of people who, one, don't like the idea of Reylo, or two, are just casually watching and haven't quite picked up on it yet, and they think, because the original trilogy was about Rey's parents, then we're still going to be going there. No, you're missing the point. We're into the last movie now. You could have made that argument going into The Last Jedi prior to seeing the film, but you just can't anymore, in my opinion. If this isn't about this resolution between Kylo Ren and Rey and ultimately defeating the dark side, then I don't know what this trilogy would end up being about, and it would be horrible story, horrible story writing. It doesn't work if you suddenly just forego all that. And for the sake of repeating myself, I'll just say it again. If there is no version of Reylo in The Rise of Skywalker, right, then what is there? The big question in my mind is, what is that version of Reylo going to be? Okay. I don't think it's going to be any sort of blood relation at all. I think the parental situation will be very much explained in a very sort of straightforward, these were your parents and this what happened, and maybe there's a big reveal there, but the fact that they're broadcasting it ahead of time tells me that it's not that central of a story. Just, hey, you're going to find out who her parents are, but that's not the big deal and the big reveal. We're saving that for when people actually go to the theater to see the movie. All right, I think that's it for now. I suppose we should probably go and dive into listener feedback for this week.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
talkshownerd@gmail.com, and you can also leave a comment on YouTube. I'll read your comments there as well. First off, we start with Across the Stars. This is a little odd, but I think I know where it's coming from. Across the Stars writes this, there's going to be a Top Gun 2 panel at Comic-Con. So we should be getting a teaser trailer. I can't wait. It's always been one of my favorite movies. I made a comment about Top Gun on Blaster. So if you want to hear my commentary on it, because I watched it over vacation, then be sure to go to the App Store and download the Blaster app, and you can listen to my commentary about Top Gun. And they decided to comment on my Star Wars podcast. I don't think I brought up Top Gun on the Star Wars podcast. I don't think I did. I know that I did put out an audio blast of it, though. All right, let's see. Princess Cupcakes writes this. I love the concept of Force ghosts helping to resurrect Ben. Excellent show, John. Thank you, Princess Cupcakes. I like that idea quite as well myself. Reylo Rising writes this. The Last Jedi is definitely overtly sexual. Ryan saying the hand touch scene is the closest thing to a sex scene in Star Wars was spot on. Even having Rey slightly grasp as if, I'm not going to go there. Excuse me. Having Rey slightly gasp. We'll stop there because it gets a little detailed, and this is still a PG show. But I do agree with you. When they touch fingers. That and many other reasons is why I get why people are thinking they're related. Why I don't get why people are thinking they're related. It makes no sense. Yeah, I'm with you on that. I would be very interested to see what the commentary was setting up for that scene and how Rian Johnson told them to play it, especially with that slight gasp. I'll leave out the more specific. If you want to know what Reylo Rising said, just go read the comments for the case for Reylo, The Rise of Skywalker Part 2, and you can read it for yourself. All right, Shock Fitness says this. Just to piggyback off of my thought last week about an episodic show of Jabba's Palace, the thing that fascinated me was the Empire seemed to be okay with Jabba's rule of the Outer Rim. The dynamic between Jabba's crew, the Empire, and the Jedi could be a story worth telling. Yeah, I could see that. That'd be really cool. I could absolutely see that. I wonder how close we'll get to that when it comes to the Cassian Andor series and the Mandalorian as well. All right. Misconduct 1 writes this. I'm sorry, John. I always thought The Empire Strikes Back was the horniest movie of the whole saga. Captain being held by you isn't quite enough to get me excited. Sorry, sweetheart. I haven't got time for anything else. Don't forget this line is followed by Leia falling into Han's lap. LOL, like father, like son. Oh, don't apologize to me, Misconduct. That was what the article writer said. I don't really have a definitive opinion either way. Let me take that back. I could definitely see that. Because of the relationship between Kylo Ren and Rey, I would probably lean more towards, and I probably made a comment like this last week, I would lean more towards The Last Jedi, but I could certainly see where you were coming from. I'm convinced it's a clear parallel between father and son, and both movies are equally sexual, subtextually charged, LOL. Thanks for that. The sexual subtext is one of the greatest elements of Star Wars movies. You may want to have an adult after-party section for the show after some of this episode's listener feedback. Right, they obviously went back and read Reylo Rising's comment. So thank you, Misconduct. I appreciate that. Shock Fitness has an added comment. Episode 1 has aged remarkably well. I didn't care for it in the theater, but know that I have 20 years of hindsight. It did a fantastic job explaining the origin of Anakin and Palpatine's rise from corrupt politician to Sith. Carlo writes this. I read the EU and loved it, but Luke in The Last Jedi talks about being a legend in that world too. We meet him again at the end when he has learned enough to see the truth behind the legend. And as a 60-year-old himself, there are times when I feel depressed about all the hubris myself, and then I look at it from a certain point of view and choose joy as Luke did in the end. Great comments, Carla. Thank you. Felicia writes this. I think that if someone knows Kylo's true identity, it's the Knights of Ren. They can be Luke's ex-students or Vader's fandom. Anyway, they seem to follow the grandson of the great Darth Vader for this reason. Amanda writes this. If Ben does have to die in order to defeat Palpatine, it would make me so emotional if Ben comes back with the help of Force Ghosts, which I mentioned on last week's show. Just a theory I had. I would love it, but man, I would be sobbing like a baby. All right, Winter in Bloom. Thank you, Amanda, for the comments, as always. Writes this. It seems like the people who dislike Luke in The Last Jedi the most are the ones who have read the EU books. I keep hearing that it is out of character for him to have gone into exile and become a curmudgeon because he was so hopeful and optimistic in his youth. I don't think that anyone who believes an optimist can't become a curmudgeon has ever seen what broken optimist is really like, though. They also say that Luke would never have had that moment where he was ready to kill Ben because he was able to be compassionate towards Vader. From my point of view, I have not read the EU books, all of Luke's actions seem to align with his character just fine. His mentors set an example of going into exile and becoming cranky old men, so it makes sense that he might follow that example under the right circumstances. Going back to the OT, Luke was not the one to face the greatest evil and defeat it with his own strength and wits. Vader did that for him, while he took the more untraditional path of choosing compassion and nonviolence to bring his father back to the light side. And then Vader, who was the one to step up and have a more traditional hero's moment, died. One would think that as a much older man, alone with the responsibility of training the next generation of Jedi, Luke might have a moment of fear when he sensed the powerful darkness in his nephew. And because he is compassionate Luke, he instantly regretted acting out of fear like someone with his character would. Of course, in the end, Luke found his optimism again and brought hope to hopelessness, apologized for his mistakes, played a prank, and proved himself to be heroic, all while being nonviolent. I can't imagine anything more in a character. Look, absolutely. And I love the comparisons that we've seen before of the images from Return of the Jedi and The Last Jedi, for people that complain about it. Luke tossed his lightsaber aside in Return of the Jedi. Luke picked up his lightsaber in a moment of anger and went to go strike down Palpatine before Vader blocked it. I mean, he did all the same things in Return of the Jedi that he did in The Last Jedi. His character arc was thorough and complete, in my opinion. Black-Eyed Lily has been sharing some fascinating essays with me as of late, and I just wanted to say thank you for that. Since you enjoyed the previous Reylo essay, I'm committed to sharing some of the ones I feel are really well done. There are truly many, many excellent ones. I don't want to overwhelm you with too much stuff, as I know you get loads of other correspondence, and then she was able to go and share some Tumblr entries charting Kylo Ren's arc in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi to fit the hero's journey for an anti-hero or a villain. Really, really great stuff. And I just wanted to take a moment and thank Black-Eyed Lily for sending me those. I've really enjoyed the reading. Ray1 wrote this comment, and based off of last week's show, where I was mentioning how Kylo Ren and Rey were dual protagonists. And they wrote, LOL, how is Solo Killer a protagonist? What I did was, and I don't have it here in front of me, I went and I shared Rian Johnson's direct comments about the film. Because Rian Johnson said directly that Kylo Ren and Rey were dual protagonists in The Last Jedi. The director said that. He wrote the movie. And credits. All right, Janet writes this. Thank you for the comment, though, Ray1. I appreciate it. I don't know what to think of this theory, but it's a really interesting listen to. Shared it on YouTube. What the Force put this out today, and it captivated my imagination. I've always been a fan of the reverse Amidala theory. The theory of Reylo being Amidala reincarnated. You might like this discussion, even if you don't believe the theory will happen. It's a great theory to speculate on. The young lady guest speaker is on Twitter and has posts on this. If you're interested in looking at it, let me know. I have a link to her page on Twitter. I like the What the Force podcast, and I've listened to this and watched this video. It's really, really good stuff. But I'm glad that you shared it so that I could share it with other individuals too. Janet, thank you very much for that. Skydraphic says this: what confused me is that Daisy Ridley said Ophelia made her feel like the main lead. What? She's the main lead in Star Wars? So I think that confirmed that indeed Kylo is the main character. Yeah, I mean, again, I go back to dual protagonists, but I hear what you're saying there, Skydraphic. As always, thank you for the comment. Disney Desi says, for Kylo to die, for Ben to be redeemed, I don't see that as being exactly like Darth Vader going out. I think it will be more like how the Beast died for Prince Adam to live at the end of Beauty and the Beast. Rey's love will be what brings Ben back after Kylo dies. Yep, I could see that too, and kind of agree. Really agree. Miranda writes this: I love how a lot of us here are so unapologetically willing to stand up and defend Reylo, or in this instance, the case for Reylo, and why, and without having the need to be vitriolic or be as bad as the other side. That's the case most of the time. In a way, I'm glad that these arguments on both sides, both ends exist, and we can have these kind of debates and articulate why we feel so strong about it. So that being said, I'm really hoping for the best. Yeah, man, look, I could be wrong, and I look at these movies as historical documents, and if I do, it's totally, and if it doesn't work out the way that I thought, or the way that we thought, I'm totally fine with that, right? It's not my story to tell. It's J.J. Abrams and Disney and Lucasfilms. All right, Black Eyed Lily is back, says this: I love that you celebrate Star Wars so much. I don't know the answer to how broadly the galaxy knows whether Kylo Ben is Ben Solo. The Force Awakens Visual Dictionary states that it was forbidden to use the name Ben Solo, which kind of points to some in the First Order knowing the truth, but I've never seen anything else that addresses this information in the galaxy at large. I think it is significant that Snoke forbade the use of Ben Solo, as this is a common trope in fairy tales and other types of stories, where the character's true identity is taken from them. I'm really hoping we get the origin behind the title Ren in the Rise of Skywalker. Thank you, as always, Black Eyed Lily. Let's see. Friend of the show, Dylan, writes this. Maybe Kylo won't get redeemed, but Palpatine will. Dylan was joking, by the way, before anybody freaks out. In all seriousness, your idea of Force Ghosts using the last of their energy to revive Ben gave me chills. How incredible would that be? Yeah, it'd be pretty cool, honestly. Scottian writes this, and I apologize if I got your name wrong. Scottian. I love your podcast. It's so refreshing and positive. I've been listening for a while, but just never commented before. I do believe that Snoke decreed that Kylo Ren's real name, Ben, never be spoken in the First Order, and part of the reasoning behind his helmet was to conceal his true identity. So, it is very reasonable to surmise that the general galactic population does not know he is Ben. And from an earlier podcast, I think the reason Kylo didn't fire on Rey in the trailer is that the boy has it hard for Miss Rey. Ben takes after Granddaddy and Dad way too much. Of course, he isn't going to fire on the girl he is so sweet on. He might kidnap her again, though. End note. I have a Kindle Unlimited. I will check out your novel. Thank you, Scottian. I really do appreciate it. All right, and that wraps it up for the show this week. Before I go, though, real quick, as I normally do, right? Selling books is hard, so I want to do my book pitch as normal because I have new listeners to the show every week. First off, I want to mention, as I stated at the start of the show, if you follow me on Twitter or especially Instagram, I've posted up a couple of videos of this. I did some tours of my office/bedroom. And again, this is always so weird for me to explain, but I keep really odd hours because I go to bed at 7 o'clock at night and then I'm up at 2:30 in the morning. So I have a separate room because my wife keeps different hours, right? So it makes sense. I don't particularly care for it, but that's just how it is. And that's just the way we are. We're kind of like, I Love Lucy, for crying out loud. So, anyway, I put up some videos I bought for my birthday, which is on Monday. I bought myself some glass display cabinets for my Star Wars toys, and I'm really excited about it. I'd always wanted a proper display case for my Star Wars action figures, and I bought these for my birthday this year, and I'm really excited to have them up and completed. So if you want to take a look at it, go to my Instagram, the Jon Justice, Jon, and you can go and find it there. And on one last note, and again, for everybody that's purchased it already or is going to read it, thank you very much. For those that haven't, I am an author. We are down to the last couple chapters of editing the second book in my first trilogy in my Embark series. Embark, Treasure in Darkness will be out in 1 month. In the meantime, I would encourage you to go and pick up the first book, Embark, which is available now on Amazon.com. And this is the brief description. In the not-so-distant future, car culture is replaced by air and space flight, made possible by two of Earth's largest corporations. Flight mechanic Taft Guardia spends his free time racing through the skies with his three best friends and the girl he longs to be with, headstrong Keith Amaro. With the planet on the brink of an industrial apocalypse, a powerful and ruthless corporate madman sent to Arkham moves to exploit the disaster with his covertly created military. When Taft, Keitha, and their friends uncover a shocking secret, Sin Arkham will stop at nothing to find them. Time is running out, but with the help of a ragtag group of young pilots, they'll fight for humanity's survival and future among the stars. Some of the reviews on Embark, this book had me hooked immediately. I can't wait for the next installment. If you like adventure, a fast-paced storyline, and characters you can get behind, this is your next book. Seriously exciting sci-fi with characters you'll love. If you want to support this podcast, this is the way to do it. And if you want to get me a gift for my birthday, this is also how to do it. Purchase a copy of Embark on Amazon, either for yourself or a friend. It's free on Kindle Unlimited, $2.99 for the ebook, $11.99 for the paperback when you get the ebook for free, and a purchase of the ebook will get you the audiobook narrated and produced by me on Audible, ACX, and iTunes for only $7.50. You can go to Amazon.com or mynerdworld.net and search for Embark, Jon, Jon Justice, and you can find it all there. And again, for my birthday, it's a fantastic way to say happy birthday for just $3. And to also help support the show, because selling books is hard. I'm really excited about the second book, by the way. You guys are going to love it. It's, it's pretty cool. It's a lot different than the first book. It is my Empire Strikes Back to A New Hope, right? Okay. All right, that wraps it up. I got stuff to go do, and that's a full show. Thank you so much for checking it out. As always, talkshownerd@gmail.com, and leave a comment on YouTube. We'll be back again next week. Until then, may the Force be with you, and here's Obi-Wan Kenobi to say essentially the same thing.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.